Hello and welcome to the end of Season 3. My name is Schulze and I'm the production team of Dreamgirl City. It feels really cool and amazing to be at the end of 3 years working on the podcast. That's so weird. It feels like just yesterday I was a bright-eyed kid in 2021 sitting alone in my room editing audio because COVID was still going on. My life was falling apart because of a bad relationship, and it just was a mess. And yet, here we are. 3 years later, going on to year 4. Thank you to all of you for sticking around, if you stuck around with me thus far, and for making this doable. And if you're new, well, welcome. Hi. I hope you listened to everything that came out first before popping into this one. But, yeah. A lot has happened since that beginning in 2021, and it's been an interesting doozy this entire year. I've had opportunities that I haven't had before. I've had chances to do things, and it's been interesting. So much so that the entire recording process was a little interesting this year. It's been an interesting year, so let's get into it. 2023 has been a very, very busy year for me, both in terms of just personal life, but mostly in creative fulfillment. This year, I've had the opportunity to travel across the country and do a lot of audio stuff. I've also had a chance to branch out, do some professional sound design stuff with people who don't have my voice or the voice of my friends, and that it's been an amazing opportunity. I've been on my college's local podcast discussing creativity and writing and publications. I published an entire freaking book, which, thinking about it, it's kind of mind-boggling that I've managed to do as much as I have, while also balancing out all the different aspects that come of being a person trying to stay alive in 2023, which is school and work, and it's kind of interesting just how much has been going on. Like, this year has been very fulfilling for me, I feel. I've grown as a creator, I've grown as an engineer, and, well, a lot of that has led to an interesting recording process. At the beginning of last year, I tried to record and edit and produce as much as I could, but well, the third season has been an interesting writing process, an interesting story thing. Originally, I like to think that the entire idea of Dreamgirl City was going to be straightforward and simple. I had an initial vision when I first was setting down and pre-planning for season 1, that it was going to be a magical city created by the Lady Dream and some representation of the devil, except dark, misunderstood, and sexy. So I guess a lot like a lot of modern interpretations of the devil. I don't know. At the time, I had this whole idea that every creative project that I was going to work on for the next few years were all going to interconnect together in some sort of extended universe. And while this was fun at the time, there were a lot of drawbacks moving forward at it. For one thing, it's kind of hard to expand on an ever-reaching lore when that lore is just in the background and you have something else going on the foreground. And it's even harder when you don't have an exact vision of what you want. The idea of Celine has been an idea that I've had since season 1. Like, that was the plan. But aside from her, there were also the problems of okay, how do we get this story in here? Because once upon a time, there was an entity named Dream, and she had a magical world all her own. And she was a mess trying to control it. So she recruited help from Shadow, or your sexy devil man, and they made a big city. And it was going to be a nice, lovely place where everyone lived, until she got super controlling and abusive and he left. And then she had some sort of manic breakdown and something. the current situation we're in. There was a lot of rewriting leading up to season 3 and even into season 2. I swear for the first half of season 1, I wasn't exactly sure who I wanted the mysterious man in the fog to be. In my mind, there were so many questions. Was he an entity of loneliness? Was he somebody who knew Celine from the past? Was he perhaps her mysterious man from the shadows? It took me so long to figure that out that by the time I started really hammering things down, it was time to start the second season. Luckily, I had a decent map of what I wanted, and we sort of went from there, where we started off with a mystery, which built out the pacing a lot more and also gave the world a lot more time to develop, which I think was an important part in building out the entire story. And it also plays into a lot of the themes that I've been trying to build. And all of this was good, but it led to a fundamental problem within season 3 that has plagued me since the end of season 1, which is you have this huge underlying mystery, this huge underlying conflict that we're not exactly sure how we get there. So how do we solve it? And well, that was the thing that plagued this season. My big problem with season 3 were two things that I had to figure out what to do with. First of all, the big one, I want to say, is Marie. What do I do with her? How does this end? What is she scheming, and how does this all tie in with Celine? I knew from the very beginning I wanted her and Celine to be connected, but exactly how they were connected has been the topic of much debate within the house of NJ Schulze. She started off initially in season 1 as a thought that she was going to be the shadow to Celine. So where Celine would represent all the dreams and positive things, she would be the nightmares. The thought was that in her process of turning evil and crazy, that Celine would become Marie. Well, that idea held some weight for a little while, and then I toyed with the idea of the shadows, because after all, there's the whole connection between the realm of dreams and the realm of shadows. So I toyed with the idea instead that Celine, being desperate, would make a deal with one of the shadows, trying to get back her beloved. You know, it's kind of a classic case of an abuser not realizing that they're the problem and desperately trying to get whatever solution they think will solve the problem, even when that solution just isn't in the cards and they're better off just letting go and moving on. So I developed that out, and my whole plan was to have Marie represent not only a shadow, but to be sort of a mocking force. You know, she sees Celine for all the badness inside of her, for her controlling nature, her temper, the abuse that she's done, and also the murder. Celine's also murdered people. But Marie sees all of that and just shoves it back into Celine's face. Just throws it back at her and makes her see it and suffer, watching her entire city fall apart and everyone else. Because that's Marie's whole thing. You know, she is a force that shows the ugly side in all of us, the things we wish we didn't see, and the regrets that we have. She feeds on pains and regrets, which is what made Marina the perfect person to go up against her. In all of my drafts, I had the original idea of Celine racked with guilt and pain and just suffering other Marie's hands. And then Marina, the person who's gone through stuff, the person who's done things but has decided to let go of the past and move on, to be the one to sort of kick her out of her depression and get her to reclaim her city for Marie. Now, was this idea executed the cleanest? I'll let you be the judge of that. Honestly, this season has been very messy, and I had to rewrite and edit and quickly re-upload a couple of episodes back in November just to make sure that the story had some sort of consistent direction, and we got that interaction with Celine and Marina. So I'll let you be the judge, because overall, I'm glad I left those themes in. I'm glad we had those moments, and I'm glad that I didn't lean in too hard with the second problem that I had to address this season, which was Jack Wright. Once upon a time, there was a funny little podcast called King Falls AM, and I really liked it, and I thought it was cool, and it died. But that's okay, because, when the kids go home and leave their toys in the play box, you sneak up behind, grab pieces that look cool to you, and start playing your own game with it. And that's how Jack Wright ended up as a character. His whole original deal was to be kind of a joke character. Tee-hee, ha-ha, poking fun at a podcast that I honestly was way too focused on back in the day. Honestly, if I could go back and rewrite parts of season 1, which I might, I would remove so many references because it's kind of embarrassing to look back at. But Jack is an interesting character. He's in the shadows, he's fighting, and his whole struggle is that he's a man trying desperately to carve out a space where he can be himself, love who he wants to love, and be accepted. Which, isn't that what we're all trying to do, in a way? He has a lot of similarities to Blaine, where they've both been rejected by the people that should have loved them. They've both been cast out in a way. They both have a lot of obsessions and fascinations with the weird and supernatural and digging where they're not supposed to be. And, well, they've accepted their lives in a couple of different ways. Jack is stuck in the past. He's literally fixated on a single moment, and all the anger and frustration that comes with it is just building up in him. I like to think that he was a nice guy at some point, just somebody that you can get along with, and he plays that on the surface, but deep down, he's angry, he's bitter, because he can't have the person he loves, either due to societal pressures on the outside world, or being separated in two different realms in the city. And all of that pressure builds into the shadows. And originally, what was supposed to happen was that Jack was supposed to just hang out in the background. So we would deal with Marie and Celine's deal, and it would all resolve by the end of the season. And then Jack would pop up, and maybe then we do a little something. The problem with that is that I wanted to condense it down a little bit and check off both those elements if I could. The podcast has been going on for a while, and honestly, I was kind of getting tired of constantly dealing with the big mystery, and I wanted to try a new shakeup after this. So I went with that big twist. I made Jack pull the rug out from under Marie, and it made a few episodes that came out after that just miserable. It was miserable to write, it was miserable to record, it was miserable to figure out anything with it. I love Jack, but he works effectively in small doses, and I had to learn that the hard way. For now, I've relegated him back to the background. Like, those last couple of episodes were very much a case of cleaning things up, trying to get stuff back on track, and hopefully bring it to a cohesive end in a season 4. At least that's the general hope. For now, Jack Wright is back in the background where he belongs, and the focus returns back on the city, where I think, honestly, the podcast shines its best when we just hone in on the day-to-days of the people in the city. Season 4 is going to feel like a return back to basics. That you can count on. We've dealt with a lot of the mystery stuff, we've dealt with a lot of the conspiracy and supernatural things, and now we are getting back to that solid emotional core, which is a bunch of people who have a bunch of hang-ups with their past and a bunch of grief and baggage and the ways they deal with it. I want to start expanding on Marina's character, who has not had a chance to fully pop up and do her own thing. She hasn't had a chance to explore her own personality or who she wants to be for herself, because getting out of a situation and starting a new life is not the same thing as figuring out who you are. And so this season, I really want her to explore, to see who she is, and to come to peace with herself. I also want to explore and build upon the emotional relationships that I've been building. We have the conflict with Marina and Blaine, who has honestly just been the worst when it comes to being a friend. I mean, they've abandoned Marina so many times. Throughout the entire third season, it took Marie finally saying something for them to finally do something about Marina's entire situation. They forgot her at the end of season 2, and it's just over and over Marina has tried to be patient, and over Blaine has just completely ran over her and left her to just sort of pick up the pieces and bail them out when it gets too intense. Well, that does a lot to a relationship, so I think we're going to see a lot of that play out, especially as Marina finds herself and celebrates herself. The other thing that I really want to toy with, that we've seen a lot of throughout these last few seasons, is the idea of Rex Adams being happy. I'm a little biased when I say this, because Rex happens to be my favorite character to write. Like, Bailey's performances just knock it out of the park every single time, that it's an absolute delight. And I think he has the strongest arc in the entire podcast, if we're being frank. Going from this sad, depressed, drunk man who is just burnt out on life and in a dead-end career to being somebody who's loving himself, accepting himself, and finding love at the end of the season. I really want to explore and expand on this idea of Rex Adams being happy. Partially because that's an interesting thing to think about. You know, how do you do the hard work after you've climbed that mountain? How do you maintain that happiness? And also because I like to believe that people can hold on to that happiness after they find it, you know, especially after being in a really dark and traumatic place for so long. You know, I mean, I like to think it's true, because I like to think I have hope for myself. But we'll just have to see. And of course, we're going to see more of Jack, because I'm not just going to sweep him under the rug. We're going to see him finally finding peace with his whole relationship, and hopefully a lot of peace for the other characters that have come. The first season was kind of all about getting your bearings and trying to find a place. Second season was about confronting the past and the mysteries and the ghosts. The third season was a lot about consequences, both for the characters and for me. And hopefully this fourth season, everyone can find peace and closure. And yeah, thank you so much for listening and for tuning in every single week. I do so much work within this podcast. It has literally changed so much about my life that I can't even imagine where I'd be without this. So again, thank you so much for everyone who listens, everyone who supports, everyone who's a part of this process. I don't know what comes exactly after Dream Girl City. I have a few ideas rattling around, and there's a few interesting little shakeups that we're going to experience, but until that time, I'll see you.